Anybody who knows me will know the fact that I grew up loving playing the graphic adventure games on PC from the likes of LucasArts and Sierra Online. I liked the idea that I was using my brain instead of my reflexes while playing these games, and it gave me a different experience than what I got on my Nintendo. With that said, anything that combined the two was extra special to me, and when I was told that I was going to be reviewing In His Time, I got excited. But before we get into that, on your time, feel free to check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/idreamofindiegames. We offer multiple tiers based on what fits your budget, and each one has its own set of perks. Gain access to our exclusive Discord server, have early access to some videos both here, as well as at our sister channel over at I Dream of Retro Games, and even have exclusive live streams. Some tiers even have access to free games, so go ahead and check us out at patreon.com/idreamofindiegames and see what fits your budget today. The developers of In His Time have created a 2D puzzle-solving adventure game that takes place in what they refer to as a beautiful shadow world. The world of In His Time is all characters that have blank black canvases for faces where you only see the 2 white dots for their eyes. While this part of the characters will seem like shadows, the rest of them will still have colors to them where you can see their hair, if they have glasses, and what types of clothing that they're wearing. For the majority of the game, you will be playing as a school-aged boy named Ollie who has a sick mother who unfortunately has been ill ever since the passing of his father. This shadow world will deal with some dark themes as this death and illness leads to a boy who is not doing well in school and is getting bullied. After a school prank goes horribly wrong and gets Ollie in trouble for something that he didn't do, the bullies rope him further into their debauchery as they sneak into a local spooky mansion. After the kids try stealing a bunch of different parts that he had laying around the house, it's where Ollie meets an old man named Joseph. It's here that Joseph asks Ollie if he can try and get the parts back for him. From here, you will be solving puzzles that will help make Ollie's life better and maybe even that of those around him. Now, while I did mention the old games of yesteryear from LucasArts and Sierra, this is not a point-and-click type graphic adventure game. Instead, you have direct control over Ollie and you will be picking up objects, but some of the puzzles might even be platform-based. On top of the platforming, you will still be manipulating objects and finding items that will help you solve things later on. You'll get clues within your environment, and as you solve puzzles, it will open up more areas for you to explore. As you gain new areas, you'll talk to more people, and it will advance the story as you find out what is going on in the world of Ollie, and maybe what he can do to make things better. In His Time will appeal to people who are looking for an adventure game that's a little bit more laid back. It's very story heavy, so you'll be reading a lot of text, and while there are plenty of puzzles to solve, sometimes there might be a bit of time in between doing so. On top of that, most of the puzzles aren't really all that brain straining, so it's kind of just going through some of the motions and being able to just get to the next point. Anytime I found myself not really knowing what to do next, I just would take a little bit of a break from playing the game, and when I came back, I was able to immediately solve it. It was probably just a case of trying to do too much at once. Nothing is really all that abstract, which is a nice change of pace with some of these games, but it also meant that there really didn't feel like there was much of a challenge going on. A perfect example is that early on in the game, you will find some numbers on the wall in one of the rooms that also just so happens to have a safe in it that has a number-based combination. Guess what that combination is? While the game does recommend using a controller to play it, it is also still playable with a mouse and/or keyboard. Both the controller and keyboard controls are pretty straightforward, with you having movement and jumping as well as the interact and item buttons, but the strictly mouse controls are a little bit different as the movement is handled from dragging the mouse while holding a button down to go in whatever direction you want to. The further that you drag it, the faster that you'll walk. It's kind of a bit of an analog type setup. I tried this setup purely for review purposes, and I can't imagine it would work all that great in the platforming segments, but if you're just interacting around and solving puzzles, it's not all that bad if you don't have a controller that's handy at that particular moment. The game also falls into one of the categories of playing an indie game that's not going to push your hardware at all, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. The previously mentioned shadow people have a nice 2D flat look to them, and nothing is super detailed, but it's going for a particular art style, and I can appreciate that. Every so often, you'll also get some lighting effects that will give it a bit more mood as well, so it's not always just going to be the same old as you're playing through the game, and it mixes things up a bit. The sound department is equally as minimalistic, but it's also not necessarily a bad thing. Some games have it where whenever you talk to a character, they have a preset little sound that they make and it gets overly repetitive and annoying, but that's not the case in His Time. I'm not saying it's a fully voiced over game. In His Time is still a game that has it where it's just the quick little snippet of sound that's not even in English when you talk to them, but there's a wide variety of different types of responses that you'll get based on what sentence they're saying and what emotion they want to convey. This is a nice little detail that's missing in a lot of indie games that I've played, and it helps really bring the story along a bit further. The music also will change in tone based on what the mood is of what's happening at that particular scene in the game, although it definitely is relegated more to just background music and isn't really anything that's going to get you tapping your toes. So while I didn't really find myself having a ton of fun while playing In His Time due to the lack of challenge, gameplay time, and replayability, and the story didn't really connect with me, I could see that there would be an audience out there that could enjoy this type of experience. I can appreciate what they are trying to do, and so it's not really my place to say that it's a bad game. It just wasn't for me, and there's definitely somebody out there that will disagree with me. I'm somebody who prefers puzzle over story, but I know that there are people out there that are the opposite. So if this is something that looks like it's gonna appeal to you, I say check it out.
Та прота.